Another thing that's really cool about Seek is how it could potentially, I mean, platforms like Seek or VR in general, how it could
Mhm.
help with education. So
Yes.
in the US, for example, there's a shortage of 400,000, kindergarten to grade 12 teachers, so primary and secondary school teachers.
Mhm.
And post-secondary institutions, there will also be shortages coming because those workforces are unusually old. And so college and university faculty
Mhm.
are going to be retiring. And so education is failing to attract and retain faculty and has equity failings that cascade into long-term disadvantages for students. And you've described previously how one
Mhm.
professor can teach 100,000 students via
Mhm.
Seek. So,
Mhm.
where do you see VR, Seek potentially having a long term impact on improving educational outcomes?
Right. Where we see it is in multiple ways, right? Because right now, like you said, the shortage, I saw a stat somewhere that was like, Europe needs this much, US, North America needs this much. It was like 4.6 million total. And then it says Africa needs a miracle because it's like when you look at the rest of the world, the shortage is so dire. And so a platform like Seek, we allow a single individual to be able to teach, at scale. So they can present their course, virtually, and then people are also able to experience it. The reason why we're getting interest from the likes of the evitals of the world is because this is a brand new industry, right? So, for example, you have the mass displacement of a lot of the current jobs as we know it. And they also have to train people for all these new autonomous vehicles, new um, all these new industries that are coming out as a result of automation. And you need, for example, 100,000 pilots, eVTOL pilots, within the next few years, which means you have to train a million. You cannot put a million people in these very expensive aircraft. It's also very dangerous. It's a danger to the person. It's a risk to the aircraft. But on Seek, you can have a million people training at the same time with the VR headsets, and so that person is able to really scale themselves and have all these people train around the world. And that's basically what we're building today. And this isn't just a sample scenario. We are working with the leading, electric aircraft company, and they're exploding, right? They have a massive backlog because right now, when you look at fuel-based airplanes, right? Helicopters that are being used for logistics and delivery and stuff like that. That cost about 4,000 an hour in fuel. It's costing about 300 an hour. So even beyond being good for the environment, it's also good for business, which is why they have these massive backlogs and they have this need to train people at scale. And these are things that you just can't do physically, which is why our platform is now in demand. And then the other aspect is the fact that in VR, the brain hasn't developed the ability to differentiate between what you do in VR. For the first time, we're creating memories, right? So it's almost as if you're actually flying the aircraft. It's almost as if you are actually, moving the equipment and doing all these things. So you're building memory, which means you're building experience. So you can now show up day one, now able to train in that helicopter because you've gotten that 1,000 hours or however many hours that you need before you can step inside the real deal. And the same thing applies, whether it's elementary education, primary education. For the CPR, we built CPR for the Children's Hospital for adult, infant, and child CPR. The interesting thing is, this was for new mothers because actually, before I did the CPR program, I didn't even know there was a difference between infant, child, and adult CPR. And a lot of new moms don't either, you know. And so by them putting on the headsets, they were able to learn and train, and they felt more confident than watching a video because they were actually holding the baby and they were, doing all the different actions. And the clinicians and the EMT that we worked with also felt better equipped. The reason Baptist Health was looking at the nursing residency is because there's such a huge gap between nurses. The average age of a nurse today is 50 years old. That's how big the gap is, because a lot of people are staying a year or two and then they're leaving. And the reason there's such a high turnover is not because of competence, but rather confidence. A lot of nurses by nature are um, very caring. So a lot of them are afraid that they don't want to hurt someone. So by now being able to learn and make the mistakes, they don't want to make a mistake on a real person. So now they can make the mistake, they can practice, they can do all of these things in VR and feel more confident to be able to do it, in real life. And then there are other areas that you just need to do in VR versus in person, like intubation, right? Where they're learning how to insert a tube into somebody's throat, and a lot of times they will perforate the throat. Today, what some hospitals do to train is they hire low income people and pay them, and then they can test, intubation on them.
Oh
But who
my
wants to
goodness.
perforate their,
Oh
organs for
god.
$50? I mean, not me. I don't
Mm.
wanna do that, yeah, and unfortunately, you have, the homeless, the elderly. Some people also do the testing on, the elderly with Alzheimer's, and, to train the nurses, how to do the intubation, yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's shocking. Yeah, VR definitely seems like a more humane way to be learning that.
It's
Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
yeah, and you can do that without the risk of perforating anybody's organs, yeah.